star quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs. A bit more about his background. It's interesting because most of what you're going to hear on the news is about NFL stars' troubles. And of course, social media has made that so much more interesting. For those of you that are big football fans, kind of the saga of Antonio Brown's Instagram account. It's like someone just needs to take him off of the internet entirely. Just be like, your job is to play ball and then sit in a closet the rest of the time. Kind of thing. But so what you get on the news regularly is the foibles, or the stat lines of these football players. But it's actually pretty amazing just how many players in the NFL are strong believers. And a lot of them have in common that you don't hear about in the news for other stuff. I was amazed to listen to Kirk Cousins share. He's the Minnesota Vikings quarterback. And in fact, he posted very recently that he had finished a read through the entire Bible in 2 years. And it was really cool because in the thing includes this invitation to all of his fans to try it for themselves and to be impacted by it. So it's cool. It's neat when you see folks kind of using their platform the right way. It doesn't mean that folks are perfect, and if you haven't figured this out by now, you want to really be careful that you never build your faith on the faith of another. Whether that's a famous athlete or your favorite weekly Sunday morning speaker, or your parents for that matter. You always want to build your faith on the one and only solid rock, which is Jesus. So we will do that. We will try to be like wise people who hear the words of our Lord and build our lives on it, and not be ones that build on the sand. So we're going to be in Hebrews chapter 11. We're going to start in Hebrews chapter 11. We're going to run around. Today we're going to step away from the Luke, our time in Luke, and go a little bit thematic and look at some, following Jesus as a sports analogy, so to speak. But I want to read something to you. We're going to play a little bit of a trivia game. So, imagine a number of you, even if you're not huge fans of watching the Super Bowl, you probably know this, maybe didn't, that the Super Bowl continues to be the most watched television broadcast here in the United States by far. In fact, the top 20 most watched broadcasts in U.S. history, of those, 18 or 19 of them are Super Bowls. The only not Super Bowl that's in that list, and still I think is in the top 10, if I remember the list correctly, was the final episode of MASH. Which is funny because the other people are like, yeah, I remember seeing that. Like, MASH is kind of apparently one of those cultural moments where it's like, I remember that. Even my sweet wife, who was very, very young when it happened, is like, yeah, I think I remember watching that. I don't. I was in a different country at the time, watching a different sport. But so, now oddly enough, in the bit of trivia of learning about the most broadcast thing, the only reason why the moon landing is not considered in the top 20 most watched events is because the moon landing was broadcast by all of the major networks. And so, if you combine the viewership across all the major networks watching the moon landing, then the moon landing wins by 40 million people for the highest broadcast ever watched. But in general, it is the Super Bowl. And that's fun. Anymore now, the Super Bowl has kind of taken on a new life of its own. Some people watch it for the sports, other people watch it for the halftime show, and other people watch it for the funny commercials. So it's like this. It's a very culturally ubiquitous moment, which is why it was worth having an announcement that our Super Bowl party was canceled. It's not like we're announcing all the other. Oh yeah, we changed our mind about this. No. This is a very monumental cultural moment, whether you're into this or not. And I absolutely love watching the Super Bowl, and I love watching the Super Bowl. which is why it annoys me when people like to talk to me during the Super Bowl. Yes. I'm not like a crazy football fan. I don't do this is my team, watch it, and I keep out I don't do that. I like good athletics. I don't really care which team it is as long as it's a good quality game. I want to see good stuff done. I don't, hey, yeah, they failed. I don't do that kind of nonsense with a team I don't like because, I'm over the age of 12. And so the thing is, but I love great sports. I love to see things well done. Actually, to be honest with you, I would love to watch great ballet. I mean, any kind of thing that's done well, I think is awesome. The only thing I love to watch not done well is short track speed skating. No, and I'll tell you why. Short track speed skating done poorly is the funniest thing you will ever see. Especially when they do it, when it's short track speed skating with the handoff, what's that called? Relay race style. Oh my gosh, I will never forget. It was in the 90s, and I had a buddy over. We must have been 6th, 7th, 8th grade or something. It was middle school. And we were watching, he told me, he's like, we need to watch short track speed skating. And I was like, this is so lame. We could play Super Mario. We could do things that are actually fun. We could lay down in the street. There's 100 things we could do that would be more fun than this. And I watched it and realized, no, this is the greatest spectacle I've ever seen. Because what happens is they fall all over each other, they slip into stuff. It's great. They need to change the name from short track speed skating to the short track derby or something. Oh my gosh, it is so awesome. And anyway, so I digress. But so, the Super Bowl, which is this massive cultural moment for us, how does it compare to some of the top sporting events throughout the world as far as viewership is concerned? This is something that's kind of an interesting thought. When you think of this is your event, this is the deal, a third of the US population is definitely going to be watching this, and then they're going to miscount the rest of it because of all the parties that are happening. But the question is, what are the most watched sports events in the history of television? So I'm gonna take us through this little list. This was very, very interesting. And I want you to right now kind of keep a mental score of, did more people watch the Super Bowl or this, okay? All right, first one. This should be a fairly easy one if you have any concept of the rest of the world, okay? Here we go. The FIFA World Cup. So the highest watched Super Bowl versus FIFA World Cup. FIFA World Cup had an audience reach of 3.5 billion people. Billion. So we have 100 million, maybe 115 million on a really good year. 3.5 billion people watching the FIFA World Cup final game. Okay, well, let's see. Okay, this one's easy. I just want to roll my eyes at this one. The Tour de France. Tour de France, right? How many people, right? Like 10,000, and they're all bicyclists, right? Yeah. Tour de France. Tour de France had an audience reach of 2.6 billion people. I know. I'm okay. I'm no wonder Europe's economy's in the tank. All right. They're let's watch bicycling. Sorry, no offense. I like to bike. I love riding my bike. I'm not dissing riding bikes. Riding bikes is great. It's just, it feels like they're yeah, let's watch a giant game of tag. And then, all right, the Olympic Games. Now this one, I think they're cheating a little bit on this one, but because the Olympic Games is kind of like trying to put up the Bible against a new Stephen King novel. The Bible's just going to win because the Bible is 66 books, okay? And it's world famous and everyone's got to buy a new one because we keep using. It's not like we're I'm this week in Stephen King's The Shining. You look at this passage for directions on how not to treat our family. We're not doing that. But the Olympic Games, the most recent one had an audience reach of 2 billion people, which is really impressive because I'm pretty sure only 50 Americans actually watched it. So the rest of the world, that was crazy. Okay. All right, now this one's really fun. This is the UEFA Champions League, also soccer, or as the rest of the world calls it, football. Audience reach in their championship game, 1.7 billion people. So Europe, just all they do is watch sports, apparently. It's just the bicycling and soccer. Okay, next one, FIFA again, this time for the Confederations Cup. Audience reach 1 billion. 1 billion. This is just the off season. This is like, the XFL or whatever the new thing is that's coming up. Kind of deal. This is crazy. All right, this one was interesting to me. Did you know that there's something called the Asian Games? Me neither. I've never heard of this. Now, I'm not Asian, don't live in Asia. I just no real connection to that. I don't even know what these are. The picture it shows is a gal with a hula hoop doing some weird contorted dance. To be honest with you, if you had showed me this picture, I would have been like, oh, Cirque du Soleil. That can't possibly have it. 986 million people watch the Asian Games. Now, that's actually not that much. That's kind of like us with the Super Bowl. That could be like part of China and the rest of them are out getting snacks for the people that are watching it. So the numbers kind of work for that one. All right, this one, the Rugby World Cup. I've heard of rugby, right? Rugby is kind of like, it's like faster football, but not as cool, not as big plays. Who's going to watch that one? 789 million people are going to watch that one. Rugby, really? Okay, this one really made me laugh. This is, and I'll be honest with you, my Italian's a little rusty, so I don't really know how to say it. This is going to either be, I think you pronounce the G, I can't remember if it's a J or a G in this one. And so I tried, cleverly I could try to be like the Giro d'Italia. The Giro d'Italia. Okay. I'm not going to tell you what it is. First, I just want to tell you that 775 million people watch this Italian thing. You know what it is? Bicycling. I don't know what it is with Europe and bicycles, but I am totally understanding their problems right now, and I absolutely understand Brexit now. Absolutely, completely convinced. I understand why the UK is like, we're done with this. We're done with all these bicycling crazy people. All right. I like riding bikes, so you're on. Winter Olympics. This one, again, I think they're combining for all of the events, but 478 million people. I will tell you the picture, though, on this one, short track speed skating, so that would make sense to me. All right, this one. Finally, the Super Bowl has a chance to win in the list of international championships, and here's what it is. It is the Cricket World Cup. The Cricket World Cup. Now, there is no possible way that the Cricket World Cup has more viewers than the Super Bowl. I mean, come on. The World Series must have more watchers than the cricket. The Cricket World Cup. Cricket is you come in here with like some kind of lawn tool and it's bowling. It's like bocce ball with your rake, kind of deal, and then people run around pretending like this is baseball. 400 million people watched it. 400 million people. We could continue the list. There's probably some, random game, in India, that is probably, a delicious cooking contest, and it probably has more people watching that. It's a good reminder. It's a good good humbling moment, We have our things that you're gonna, if you watch the whole, a Super Bowl. I'm one of those crazy people that like to watch the little, post-game conversation because I am just fascinated with just how ridiculous of a question they ask people when they get up on the podium, Because you get on the podium and they say dumb things like, you guys are world champions of a game only played in the U.S. And, and you get up there and you're waiting to like, oh, how do you feel? Talk about the season, like in the locker room, there's always, the sportscaster. At first they ask somebody who owns the team, didn't play anything, all they did was sit there and count their money, kind of deal, and you want to be like, the question needs to be, yes, and how much money did you earn this time? That would make more sense. Then they hand it to them, and it's all these other people did the work, it's just like what it is here in America, we hand it to that guy because he owns it, but everybody else did the work, but then they get to the player, right, and I kid you not, just watch for this, if you watch for that moment where they're like, this player, they've done incredible things, the feat across weeks and months, and really over a year when you count their training in the off season, the kind of exercising that they do, the level of commitment, and the question is always, so on 4th and 15, there in the third quarter, what were you thinking when you threw the ball and that person didn't catch it? And it's like, And I love it because the players never answer the question. They go, I just have a great team, and it's funny because, if you read between the lines, you know that he's in a nice way saying, this is the dumbest question you could have asked me. I don't know why you're bothering to ask me. Like, this is a euphoric moment. You want me to remember what was going through my head on a very incidental play, It's the most ridiculous thing in the world. What's funny, though, is I think sometimes spiritually we do that, We look at folks and we like want to boil people down to a particular event that we witnessed, instead of like across the whole of this life lived. Maybe a little more sensitive to that. We had a coworker. She passed away in our office a few weeks ago now. But it was a precious thing. It actually, as far as we can tell, she passed away in the office. As the firemen were taking her out and trying to get her downstairs, and they're like wheeling her out in the gurney. Like the way they put her on the gurney is not the way you put somebody on who is still around. And even kind of the look going out, it was like, okay, yeah, that's probably the end of it. She was about 77 years old, but what was really interesting was that she was kind of the last of the Mohicans, so to speak. She was the last of her family. Her one sibling that she had passed away really early, I think when they were teenagers. She had been adopted. They really didn't know the history or any other relatives out of that. She'd never married, never had kids, and she was super connected to a lot of folks. And so I got kind of put in charge of editing and making sure that all of the different things that were written about her were put into a nice cohesive single unit. So I got a chance to really get to know her in an interesting way. And it's funny because it was interesting how much, and it makes sense as people are processing, how much people, when they were talking about her, kind of boiled it down to their particular interaction with her. It was their particular interaction with her as this thing that kind of colored the whole of stuff. And when you looked at the whole of her life, it was really interesting. It was so incredibly appropriate that she would pass away after an almost full for her day of work at this place that she had given so much of her life to. A bit of information that a lot of folks didn't know is that she actually wasn't raised in a Christian home. And that what got her on her journey with Christ was a friend who had the courage to live her faith in a special way. And that made an impact, so much so that in junior high, the friend asked if she wanted to come to youth group with her. And out of that, come to church and get involved and get connected. And she gave her life to Christ and got involved. And then for the rest of her life, lived this very others-oriented life where she sacrificed constantly for other people and always made it a point to try to invite people to meet Jesus. It was this incredible story to kind of look through. And hey, nobody's perfect, there was this really funny moment, if I may, where 2 or 3 people had written in there about how, the great thing about her was that she always knew more about your family than you did, She always knew more about what was going on with others, and often people would call her to find out what was going on, which is a little bit of a double-edged sword, right? You're like, yeah, you are the Grand Central Station with a slight line of gossip running through, you kind of do, here's the deal, nobody's perfect, and I know it's don't speak ill of the dead. I'm not. The woman's, the last thing she did before she passed was sin against me. So, there was. I had asked her repeatedly, hey, have you been having this sensation before? Because I think we should call the paramedics. No, this is the first time. Well, then I really think we should call the paramedics. No, I'm fine. I just need to lay here and rest, all my heart's giving out, kind of thing. I know, it's tough stuff. It's like, gosh, do we laugh at this? Do we not? Kind of thing. So she loved Jesus, she's fine, she's there, that's the deal. What was the last thing you did before coming to Jesus? I was surrounded by the the most gorgeous fireman in the world, you know. No, but before that, oh, well, I told Joe that I didn't really need the paramedics. So, it's okay. It was a very precious time. It was very precious. To get there, to hold her hand, you know, and her expression of feeling afraid, to be like, hey, you know, I'm not going to lie to you, this could be really huge, or this could be the flu. But the good news is, all these things that we tell the rest of the world are true for you. And you know that. You know, just this precious, precious time. But to look across the whole of her life and to not, you know, because the thing is, oftentimes, and again, you'll see this in the game, when you zero in on a very, very specific play, very, very specific event, you can kind of twist the narrative in one way or another. And not see that games are won and lost, not over a single play. As much as people want to say that, as much as people want to talk like it was a single play. And it's funny how we'll do that with each other. The game of the day is won and lost based on the comment that person made, based on the failure that happened there, instead of looking at the whole. I've had to be confronted with that and realizing that I have been fairly judgmental of some people in my life based on singular events instead of the whole. And what's great about the passages of Scripture that we're going to look at is that it really is about this kind of like looking across the whole and asking, what is a life that's lived for Christ? What does that look like? If we could say like a life that is lived the right way, sort of this like Hall of Fame style of living. The Bible actually is going to give us an indication of that. And what's interesting is it's not going to pretend like these singular events aren't important, but it is going to look at the whole. So we're going to go into Hebrews 11. We're going to actually start our reading at verse 32. We're going to be in the New Living Translation. Excuse me. So if you're using a mobile device, you want to use the letters NLT if you want to follow exactly with me. Otherwise, you can just if you go classic, you know, it's very similar to NIV, and or you can watch the slides behind me. So let's look at this. You know, a life lived for Christ through the lens of putting in the same kind of effort that we're going to see today in this sporting event. And but let's not make the mistake of thinking that it's just today's game that matters and not realize that it was every game that came before that mattered too. So let's pray. We'll dive in. Lord God, thank you. Thank you for the way that you insert yourself into the various cultural idols that we have. Lord, here's an event that people will move their entire lives around. Lord, these gatherings, these parties, or even just watching it at home, where these things are going to be guarded with a jealousy, with a jealousy for the time, more so than they'll even put towards their own wedding day. And Lord, it is an idol. This God of gridiron football is an idol. Lord, it's important that we recognize that. You know that. And yet, how cool you are to show bits of yourself in it. Things that we can look at, things that we can grab onto, things that we could talk to coworkers and friends and family about that point to you. Or may we see the altars to you, the altars to the unknown God that is mixed in here. And Lord, may our own enthusiasm for you more than rival our enthusiasm for this sport, for any sport, for any form of entertainment. And Lord, may the effort put forth by these players today on this game, the effort that was poured out over the season, or may it be dwarfed by the energy and effort that we put towards following you. I thank you that we are not saved by our effort, but we are saved for it. So may we live like it's the spiritual Super Bowl every day. Thank you, Lord, in Christ's name. Hebrews 11. In Hebrews 11, the author, very likely Luke, is writing this kind of explanation of how Jesus is the fulfillment of everything that the Israelite law has been pointing to, everything that the Jewish people are waiting for in Messiah. And he makes this pivot where he talks about what the life of faith looks like. And for the first 31 verses or so, he's going to go through and describe all of these examples of how these seminal events, these big plays in the lives of God's people, were all motivated by faith. In fact, he even goes back to the idea that the creation of the universe is brought about in an act of faith, so to speak. And it's a little more like by faith we believe that this happened, but it's interesting because even in the language, it betrays the possibility of this idea of belief occurring there, which totally fits in on the idea that it was Christ that really is the agent of creation, and that it was at God's word, that everything that came into existence was spoken out of nothing. We use a Latin term among theologians, this idea of the ex nihilo, like it comes from nothing, which ironically we continue to find more and more in astrophysics is just the most crazy truth in the world, and nobody knows how that could possibly have happened. And so now a new theory is being proposed, a theory that really can't be tested, let alone proven, that the universe has been in a constant state of existing and de-existing, imploding on itself and exploding back on, and who knows which number we're on, sort of Matrix style. And it's ridiculous, because then you got to ask the question, where did that come from? I love how the Word of God has the answer for that explosion that either occurred 6,000 years ago or occurred 15 billion years ago, whichever time frame, out of nothing, out of God speaking it into existence. If that isn't an act of faith, I don't know what is. So even God acting out in faith, that's crazy to think about. And so all of these big plays, and now we're going to have this sort of like, it's sort of like a Hall of Fame. They call it the Hall of Faith, but it's like the Hall of Fame, of faith moments. And then, the writer is realizing that he can't even begin to go through the list of all these big plays in the lives of the Hall of Fame players. And so now we're going to have this sweeping montage. And the sweeping montage is powerful. Because as human beings, we want to see faith and growth, all these things, only in the success moments. And actually, for the most part, what we've been seeing is all these successes, and we're going to get a run through a bunch of successes, but also illustrating the power of faith is going to be what looks like a series of failures. It's really wild stuff. So this, I hope, encourages you as much as it encourages me when it comes to living for Jesus. Hebrews 11, starting verse 32, this is the Word of God. How much more do I need to say? It would take too long to recount the stories of the faith of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and all the prophets. By faith, these people overthrew kingdoms, ruled with justice, and received what God had promised them. They shut the mouths of lions, quenched the flames of fire, and escaped death by the edge of the sword. Their weakness was turned to strength. They became strong in battle and put whole armies to flight. Women received their loved ones back again from the dead. But others were tortured, refusing to turn from God in order to be set free. They placed their hope in a better life after the resurrection. Some were jeered at, and their backs were cut open with whips. Others were chained in prisons. Some died by stoning. Some were sawed in half, and others were killed with the sword. Some went about wearing skins of sheep and goats, destitute and oppressed and mistreated. They were too good for this world, wandering over deserts and mountains, hiding in caves and holes in the ground. All these people earned a good reputation because of their faith, yet none of them received all that God had promised. For God had something better in mind for us, so they would not reach perfection or completion without us.
Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses, or your text might say cloud of witnesses, to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up. And let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith, or the author and perfecter of our faith. Because of the joy awaiting him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and now he is seated in the place of honor beside God's throne. That's the word of God. Following Jesus is a really confusing thing as a human being. We've talked about this before, but the reality is we cannot talk about this too much. It's something that we fall into now and then. It's something that what we're surrounded by culturally is a hard thing to get over. And that is this. There is a sense in which, when we're all really, really honest with ourselves, at our lucid moments, where we recognize that the gift of salvation doesn't make a lot of sense. It really doesn't. Now, when you know the rest of the math, you realize that it has to make sense, and this is the only option. But until you come to terms with the rest of that math, it's really hard to think that there is this God in infinite perfection. If you get to that point, you want to argue that why does he allow evil things? There is actually answers to that. So let's say we've got that answered, right? It takes a while to answer it, so you guys get long enough sermons anyway from me, so we can do that another time. But so you've got this God in infinite perfection, and when you have that clear vision of God, as clear as it possibly can be, and then the clear vision of self. We will argue, I'm a good person, I do good things, and I try to do good stuff, and here's my list of good things, and that, whatever. But it's funny because there's those dark night of like great clarity, right? Where you realize, I am crummy. Like if people if we could do what we now do with computers, where we've got like the monitor of my thoughts, just my thoughts. Oh man, like my self-righteous sense of goodness is right off the hard drive at that point. I mean, really. And so when you come to terms in that clarity of going, wow, I am horrid. God shouldn't want me. And you know what? That's true. It's true. We are horrid people. We really are. We really, really are. And even, I know we want to be like, yes, but we were innocent when we were infants. Just ask a new parent about the innocence they experience, especially in the middle of the night. Oh, the innocence of requiring to be pampered and treated perfectly, to have the perfect sensation of dryness in the diaper, to have the perfect level of fullness in the belly without the gaseous response, and it's uncomfortable, and now and I don't want to be here in the dark by myself, and the guy, kind of thing. Like, trust me, the innocence of humanity goes right out the drain the moment that thing comes right out anyway. So, like, we know. And it's funny that we even would declare children innocent when we see the guilt all over the place. So it's true. The good news starts with the worst news of all. You and I are worthy of destruction. You and I are worthy of being cast aside. You and I have done precious little, and actually have done excessively much to not be acceptable to God. It's true. And when we have that clarity, even when we want to blame certain things on others and how, the things they did kind of set us on this trajectory, the bottom line is we have always had the choice of what we were going to do with what was given to us. And we have frequently done the wrong thing. We don't deserve the love of those around us, let alone the love of a perfect God. Yeah, that's the good news. Which is why the good news is so good. That in spite of that, Romans 5:8, that God demonstrates His love for us in this, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Paul even begins to talk about it. He's like, which is pretty impressive because most people won't even die for a good person. If he was amazing, maybe. This is the Americanized vernacular of what Paul's saying in that section. It's like maybe for someone like super awesome you might, but not even for a good person. But here's God demonstrating His perfect love, that He died for us while we were still rejecting Him. John writes that even our capacity for love, oftentimes it gets translated, we love Him because He first loved us. No, there is no Him. There is no Him in that. We add that pronoun. It could be pointing in that, but it's actually just we love because He first loved us. It's funny because there's even the implication that our capacity as a species to love, even if we don't follow Him, is sourced directly from Him. That's how awful we are. That our own capacity to love has to come from a divine place. We've got to come to that place where we recognize just how awful we are. And it's a good thing. And we don't want to feel that way, and it makes us depressed and discouraged. And yet, that's the spot you got to be, that humble spot of recognizing that so that you can then receive what God has to offer, which is total, unconditional, forever love. Forgiveness of everything, past, present, future. A love that is just inconceivable for us. Imagine the person who has harmed you the most in life, mistreated you the most. And I don't mean, we can get into the whole, our spouse because we live together. Yeah, but that's not what I mean, though. I'm talking like the outsider. Maybe it is. If that's the case, maybe we should get some counseling probably on deck. But think about it. Like that person who they've really, and now see yourself giving up everything to restore them. And now spending the rest of eternity lavishing love upon them. That's God's love for us. It doesn't make sense. And yet it's true. And that love given to us in Jesus Christ, there's nothing we can do to earn it. We can't even demand it or require it. Even in the great battles between predestination and free will, which I think are bonkers, I don't think we should have that. I think we need to discuss God's sovereignty and His agency, which is on a different level. But whatever. Even in the argument back and forth between, did He predestine and all that stuff, is still the reality that this only exists. This opportunity to be loved and to be saved only exists because He did it. Only exists because He offers it. There is nothing we do to make it exist. There's nothing we do to make it available to us. There is nothing that we do to make its promises be assured for all of eternity. It's all in Him. And that is a hard thing to accept, especially as a Western thinker, which is what we are. It is hard, and then you add this here in America, American exceptionalism, which I know people say in a derogatory way. I don't mean it that way. I know what that means. It's this passion, this desire to be the best, to be competitive, to do our best at stuff, to create the best. That is not a bad thing. It's a wonderful thing, but it does get in the way of our ability to receive this gift that we have done nothing to earn, and to accept the fact there's nothing we can do to earn it. And that until we are at that spot in our hearts, there's a danger that we have not yet received this. And don't freak out about it. You're like, oh my gosh, did He just... No, because then if it is up to us, it's not a free gift anymore. By faith, we have to just trust Him to receive it. Crazy. It's very hard to wrap our minds around it when we really start thinking about it and realize, the magic words, it's not that, it's this conversion of the heart. But the reality is we do nothing to earn this, and that is the big stumbling block. I've interacted with various folks who are Muslim, and that is oftentimes the big hurdle, the big push. You Christians are licentious because there's nothing you have to do to earn God's love and salvation. Actually, you won't even argue the point of love with someone who's a Muslim. They don't see God in those terms. But this idea of earning His favor, you gotta work hard. Your heart will be weighed someday in a scale against a feather, and if the feather is lighter than your heart, you are toast. It's a fairly hopeless belief system. Sorry to say it. It really is. And what stinks is for all the ones who think that they can kill other folks in the name of their God and get special treatment, like most of the Muslim world thinks that's bonkers. So, yeah, trust me, I can't imagine how heavy those hearts weigh in the scale. But it's this crazy, because as a human, you're like, but I've done nothing to earn this. And you go, yeah, but that is God's great favor to give to us. And so when you can come to that total point of not just humility before God, but humiliation before God, and receive His love and His salvation, it's a great thing. The problem is that oftentimes we as believers stay there. There's nothing I can do to earn this. There's nothing I can do to be good. There's nothing I can do. It's all Him. He does all of it. There's a whole theological system built on the idea of reading the Old Testament stories as it's not about you trying to grow into this, it's Jesus doing all the work for you. And it really misses an important nuance, which is that, yes, there is nothing we did to get on the team. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. We just say yes to the invitation to be on the team. But then following Jesus flips it. So first we've got our cultural standard of we got to earn, favor and love and whatever else. We experience it in the rest of our life everywhere else, right? And then we got to flip that in order to receive Jesus. And when we receive it, we're saved. We're with Him forever. There's nothing we can do to earn His love and His favor, and that's great. And I'm here. And then all of a sudden it flips again. And now it's these crazy standards of living for Him that are like impossible. And yet the Word of God constantly pushing us towards it. Live like this. Follow Him like this. Jesus' crazy, spooky words. If anyone would come after me, they must deny themselves. Okay, I can do that. And pick up your cross. Wait, what? See, for us, it seems like a nice symbolic thing because we like to hang up crosses in our houses. And I want you to know to the first century folks, I've said this before, but for those of you that haven't heard this funny thought, us hanging up crosses and fun words behind them would be like if you went to somebody's house and you saw that they decorated their home with inspiring quotes and pictures of the electric chair. What is that gurney? Oh, are you a medical person? No. Hang in there, and it's a beautiful shot of a lethal injection table. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, with a giant noose hanging out of a tree. I mean, that is us. That is us. I need you to know that first century Christian, or anyone for that matter, were to walk in to some of our most beautifully adorned Catholic churches, and they saw the statue of Jesus hanging on the cross, they would think they were in a death cult and want to run away. We actually have written pieces. We have written, discussions, correspondence back and forth between an emperor and one of his vassal kings about what do we do with these crazy cannibals. They meet on a weekly basis and they eat somebody's body and blood. What do we do? Yeah. I mean, it's just, there's so much about us following that's just crazy and it's bonkers. And then you've got this, this list. And you look through it, it's like Paul can't even get a complete list in any one of his letters. He has to have a bunch of letters. And some of them have this set of rules and others have this set of rules. And it always starts with, remember, we have done nothing to earn this. There's nothing you can do to earn this. Accept it in its freedom. There's nothing you can do to earn it. Now here's the list of all the things you need to do. It's confusing at times. But it's also incredibly true. See, the thing that's great about salvation is it doesn't just save us from our past sins, okay? it also sets us free to go forward and screw up a bunch. And yet, there is this crazy tension of like an unlimited supply of forgiveness from God, and yet an unlimited amount of expectation from Him of what He wants out of us. That's where the whole seeing God as a parent is really, really helpful. In recognizing that as a parent, on the one hand, there's really not anything your child can do to cause you to reject them. And if you do as a parent, but there are these crazy high standards to meet too. And we always look at the parent who doesn't have those standards as being the parent that has abdicated their role. It was great. I was watching one of the kids come in here shaking hands with everyone. It was wonderful. And it turned into a funny conversation with a couple of guys right here. And let me tell you this kid went around shaking hands. A number of the other kids didn't know what to do with it. We had a nice chuckle about it. But do you know which kid got the praise? It wasn't the ones that were like, I don't know what to do. It's one trying to shake hands. Why? Because culturally, that's where we're trying to go. We're trying to teach you how to greet people and what we understand to be the culturally appropriate way to greet someone and to engage them. See, that's how God is with us. And so we see in this list, this montage of these things that get people into the Hall of Fame with Jesus as these grand efforts to serve Him and to stick it out. What's wild is that in that list, we have a list of crazy successes. You know, taking over whole cities, putting to flight whole enemies, crazy miracles, passing through fire, all this stuff. But then there's also this list of like colossal defeats. In fact, there's a whole list of killings. They get pretty graphic at one point. You know, it's like, I remember reading this section of Hebrews to, you know, my little ones for the first time and kind of trying to like, you know, hum over it, you know, I'm reading through it. And some were to end as a song and half, and others were going to, you know, like, great. Nightmares from the Bible. You know, like it's a great children's video that we could do. You know, you get the Veggie Tale, and it's like kid comes in screaming, you know, ah! What happened? The Philistines cut Larry the cucumber in half and served him in a salad. You know, like, you know, kind of deal. You just don't get it. And yet, that's the thing. That's the kind of life that God is calling us to and drawing us towards. Not the spectator style of living that we're going to see whenever the camera flashes over into the audience who is cheering and dressed up and looks like crazy people. And who are under the impression that cheering does much of anything for the game. See, all too often, in a faith where we've been invited to play, we tend to be content being spectators. I want you to know that something that it bugs me lightly. I taper my bugness in the understanding that we're all gifted differently. But I am amazed at how often, over the course of the last 10 years of putting out the invitation, if you'd like to share what God's doing in your life, if you'd like a chance to be up here, and by the way, you know you don't have to go the full hour, okay? Andy and Cody barely hit the 30-minute mark. Melissa was at 25 last time. Like, you know, Beth sometimes gets to 35, you know, but it's not about the time. In fact, everyone loves it when it's the shorter one, you know, so. But so, how often I have to coax people. Speak. There's something to share. I'm not even asking you to play, you know, all 4 quarters of the game. Play one. Make a few plays. Tell me, yeah, I'll speak, but I want you to be there with me. Okay, it's a team game, team sport. Or, man, we have a need in this area. Yeah, but now I'm here to be fed. Wow, man, really? Really? You know what we call people who don't know how to make their own food? Children. Children. Do we not desire to grow up? And I'm like, this is not a spectator sport. I love it when people discover the value and get to have the satisfaction of bringing the coffee and the donuts. Sometimes folks get into the point where they're like, oh gosh, I gotta do this again. And it's like, no, don't you understand? Like, you bring refreshment to others. Honestly, so I took a muscle relaxer over the weekend just to help. I think I strained something in here, and anyway. And so, I'll be honest with you, I was like way more lethargic this morning, and I gotta tell you, I had two big thoughts today. The first one was this: man, what a gift it is that Roger was bringing the truck. What a gift. And then, man, I was feeling like, man, I don't know if I have the energy to speak this. And there was that coffee right there. Now, I didn't do the donut because I know the donut would be like a quick jump and then a crash. But so I'm gonna have that later. But I want you to know that my heart is so blessed this morning, all because one guy has had the heart to serve once a month to bring in this truck, and it fell on a day that honestly, man, I really needed it. And that whoever it was, I could go look at the list, who brought in the treats today. And what a blessing that was to me this morning. And there's all these ways that we can play in this game. I got to tell you, it's such an encouragement to me when we get towards the end of the year, and Andy's looking at Andy keeps our numbers, the finances, and I will look and I will see faithfulness from so many of us here in the form of giving, and it's just such a blessing to see that. A pleasure to look at that and go, wow, look at these people. And look at these sacrifices. And running the totals in my head and going, man, that is a really nice used car that person gave up for the year. And then there are other folks, and their numbers aren't that high. But I think about what they've gone through in life, what stage of life they're in, what their experiences have been, and go, man, what a huge blessing. It's kind of a bummer that we keep the giving stuff fairly, that we follow the discretion patterns. I know that's the popular thing that's really good. In the past, when they would show it, it was wrong for the reasons, and people would feel pride and that kind of deal. But I wish there were ways that I could come and show you the incredible faithfulness of your brothers and sisters. It's powerful stuff. Every so often, though, I won't see a name on there, and I go, what you're missing. Not, oh goodness, why didn't you give? That kind of deal. But, wow, what you're missing out on. In that opportunity to give and to sacrifice and to be able to look, especially when you get that letter at the end of the year and you're doing your taxes and you realize that this amount of money you gave does nothing, for your if you're itemizing because of the new change. And to realize that even now, it's even more of a gift because it doesn't probably help you that much. But it helps the people of God. And to see all the different places all over the world where it's helped people and how it's helped people here. This level of sacrifice. Paul writes this about the life of faith. And he does it out of the context, oddly enough, not so much about how can you better live your life for Jesus, but in his own life. A life that I think we could argue is one of the most devoted to Christ that ever was. You talk about someone who sacrificed everything for Jesus. Actually, who sacrificed, rivals, and probably bests any of the other apostles is Paul. A Paul who brings it up and is like, but I need to be humble. This is not something to boast in. And he writes about the additional sacrifices that he's made to identify with other people. All just to bring the gospel. This is what he writes in 1 Corinthians 9:24. He says, don't you realize that in a race everyone runs, but only one person gets the prize? So run to win. All athletes are disciplined in their training. They do it to win a prize that will fade away. But we do it for an eternal prize. So I run with purpose in every step. I'm not just shadowboxing. I discipline my body like an athlete, training it to do what it should. Otherwise, I fear, after preaching to others, I myself might be disqualified. Wow. That is a humble approach. That I could be running around telling other people how to do this, but if I'm not doing it, it's not real. That's always, I think, a good challenge, especially if it fits in with James 3:1. Not many of us should presume to be teachers, for there's a different judgment, a different standard there. But Paul makes an interesting and important statement, and we'll kind of wrap up here, and that is that we are all, even to the ancient world, we are constantly witnesses to feats of discipline and effort, to levels of activity, of leaving it all out on the field, so to speak, for a prize that fades. Someone's going to go up for their MVP award for the game. They're going to get asked a dumb question about on this particular play. And they're going to be MVP player of this game, part of a world champion team. And it won't be long before people start speculating who's going to be the world champion next season. It won't even be weeks that pass. In some markets, it won't even be days. In some places, with their rabid fan bases, tomorrow morning, they're going to be talking about the potential for their team to be world champion. The amount of effort that has been expended over the course of this season, the amount of money that's been expended. I mean, you're talking about, it's like the worst news you can get from your doctor is this, right? Hey, you need to go get an MRI, And it's worst news for two reasons. Why? One, crap, why do I need an MRI? And two, how am I going to pay for that? How's my copay, my deductible, and this, and it could be a couple thousand, maybe more, right? They MRI the bananas out of these people like every game. But we're going to have an MRI. For us, it's like this big thing we can barely afford. For them, it's like, we're going to, he's got the Gatorade over there, and then he's going to have a turkey leg and an MRI. It's like it's just right there. He's going to get a napkin on his way. That's what happens. That's how much is invested into this. For a prize that in some places won't even be recognized less than 24 hours later. And yet we are living for something that will last forever. I love Ephesians 2:8 through 10. People love Ephesians 2:8 and 9, and you really can't ever have Ephesians 2:8 and 9 unless you're going to bring verse 10. And I think the problem is that too many of us have an Ephesians 2:8, 9 faith when we really need to have an Ephesians 2:8 through 10 faith. Now let me read it for you. It's this. God saved you by His grace when you believed. Yes, that's true. And you can't take credit for this. Yes, that's correct. It's a gift from God. Yes, that's correct. Salvation is not a reward for the good things we have done, so none of us can boast about it. That's correct. And too many of us, that's our faith when we leave here, is an Ephesians 2:8, 9 faith. When God has given us an Ephesians 2:8 through 10 faith. 10. 2:8 and 9 got you here. 10 is what we're supposed to walk out with. 4, we are God's masterpiece. Also translated workmanship. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can rest on His merits and do nothing until we die. So that we can come to church on a weekly basis and get the feels because Joe knows how to project. Because he took drama classes once and played in a rock band. Because he was born in a family that knows how to speak super intensely. Because he gets animated for no reason whatsoever sometimes. Because sometimes it's funny, and sometimes it's emotional, and sometimes it's serious. And then go out and live my life as a spectator. Right? I gotta tell you, too many of us, even though we got the words right in front of us, tend to live that. As if that was verse 10. Verse 10, so we can do the good things He planned for us long ago. God has invited us into the only game that matters. In a colossal cosmic battle between good and evil. A game that we are assured to win. A game where our quarterback, our lead striker, our whatever the important player on the cricket team is, the one who has never fallen in the short track speed skating, has scored so many points that the other team has no chance of winning. All they can try to do is put more points on the board. We have been invited to play in that game, not spectate, but to play. And it doesn't matter that we feel like we aren't very good at it. It doesn't matter that there are better players than us. We are all called to different positions on this team that has like a billion different positions to play. And we all need to play it and do our best. As you watch this game today, or as you don't, maybe you won't, I want to challenge you that the amount of effort that is going to be laid out on that game is just the tip of the iceberg of the kind of effort that God wants from us in living for Him. And the thing is, we can. We have unlimited penalties, which is a weird thing to say. Doesn't mean we won't push the game back, doesn't mean the enemy won't be able to use some of that to score some points on the board. But we are guaranteed to win this game because of who we're playing for and playing with. So, see your faith that way. See your faith that way. You know, we worship one who left it all on the field, quite literally. Who went to the field of betrayal, the field of false accusations, the field of torture, the field of unjust death, and left it all there for our sake. One who knew that this was going to be the most important play he was ever going to make, and that for a time it was going to look like he had lost the game. But in his obedience, sealed the game for us for all time. And one who has told us, play the game the way I played it. Be willing to give up anything and everything for His glory. And so that's what we do when we come and we remember Him. We participate in this beautiful ordinance of communion, of the Lord's Supper, of the Eucharist, this Thanksgiving meal. This Thanksgiving meal that we know He is present in some form. But do you know why? Because He is always with us. Present always with us. The Apostle Paul, probably the all-star player after Jesus, reminded us that on the night He was betrayed, our Lord took bread and He broke it. And He said, "This is my body given for you." And in the same way He took the cup, said, "This cup is a new covenant given in my blood. Do this to remember me." And then as often as we eat this bread and we drink this cup, we don't just remind ourselves, but we declare to the world the play that sealed the game. The play that makes our plays, successful or not, at least in our own eyes, just a part of this game that's been functionally won, for which we've been invited to do our best, knowing we can't lose, but knowing we could score more points. That's a fun game to play. Christ's body, Christ's blood. I play in remembrance of His play. Come when you're ready. Hebrews 12, sort of the completion of the thought about giving your all, but also with this image from football. When you have an offensive line, it's supposed to be guarding the quarterback. If every player but one does their best, what happens? Quarterback gets sacked. Every player but one can do their best. And if one surrenders the spot, quarterback's probably going down. Good news is our quarterback's invincible, so that's helpful. But in light of that, I leave you with this blessing. Oh, it's a blessing. It's a challenge. Verse 12. So, take a new grip with your tired hands and strengthen your weak knees. Mark out a straight path for your feet so that those who are weak and lame will not fall, but become strong. We're not just playing this for him. We're playing this for each other. So, play. Don't spectate. Play. Don't just try to do what will get you by. Do your best. Play hard. Play to win. Let's put some more points on the board for Jesus this week. And I do hope you have a fun time watching the game. In his name.